In the Name of Satan came out in 1990, and it is another piece of satanic panic Christian propaganda hosted by none other than Bob Larson. I wonder if Glenn Benton from Deicide ever watched this. Hmm. So, a random picture of Eddie from Iron Maiden is seen at the start and never even mentioned. You just randomly see that. Okay. So, from the very start of the film, we see mutilated bodies, no censoring at all. After the Eddie little thing, you just start seeing dead people and mutilated animals. And I was like, wow, we're already we're doing this. Okay. So it was shocking to me that this was such a prevalent thing with Christian propaganda, these Christian broadcasts. It's disgusting how actual mutilation and gore photos were used for views. The beginning scene with Bob Larson, it zooms out with all these alleged satanic symbols that were graffitied in public, which they really didn't show. I don't remember any like photos of this graffiti. This is strangely one of the ones where they don't show it, if more than like maybe one or two photos in the wild. They just show a bunch of like examples that they haphazardly tagged on the set, that they made for the film. There's no explanation to what these symbols are. The viewer is just supposed to believe that the symbols are bad. And what's really funny is that it's so low effort because one of these is literally, it says Natas, which is just Satan backwards. I mean, it's like, oh my God, huh? What? After watching this, after watching all of these like Christian propaganda films, I seriously just wonder what is up with Christians and things being backwards, right? Oh my God, it's backwards, it's evil. Anything backwards is evil. But if Satan is bad, but Satan is bad frontwards, but Satan backwards, wouldn't that be good? So anyway, after this, we see our usual round of ex Satanist cult members that manage to break free. And by the way, there are no title cards. You don't actually get a formal spelling of anybody's names. You're just supposed to believe, oh, it's just Carol or not Sharon. It's like Carol, Christy, and Esther. And you don't. Okay, how do you spell that? I want to look them up. But of course, this was like 1990, so you're not supposed to think about that. But anyway, these three women recount their stories of being in satanic cults with keywords that you hear in other similar films. Oh my God. They talk about feces, of course, because it always goes back to fucking shit. And then urine. And then, of course, rape. And then it goes to snakes. The stories make little sense and they aren't believable. One woman claimed that she would be suspended in a closet while snakes would be left on the floor slithering around her. You know, torture stories, just torture. So, this doesn't make any sense, though, from even a gravity perspective, because how could you be suspended in the air and from a closet? How small are you, or how big was the fucking closet? I don't know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be swearing. I know I swear a lot, and I really shouldn't. But you just come across this stuff, and it's like, it doesn't make sense. And that's the part that gets on my nerves. I can't, I So another woman conveniently, this is Esther. Esther conveniently grew up thousands of miles away from where the film was being made, that I think we're supposed to assume. Sorry, I'm getting hungry, so I'm checking what time it is. But and so she recounts what's obviously a fake story with lots of and uhs. There isn't any emotion expressed other than somebody looking up, trying to remember what she was supposed to say. Obviously, she had her lines. I mean, you see me here. People ask, why aren't you looking at the camera? I mean, I'm looking right here. I'm looking at the screen to make sure it's still recording. But this is me looking straight at the camera. And even still, they're interviewed like this. And so the people like Esther, she like looks up a lot like, so then, and then we had to do this. And then, and to me, that's like fucking fake. It's fake. It's fake. Oh my God, I'm getting hungry. Should I have pizza or a burger? I don't know. None of these women who are interviewed cry or frown while recounting their stories. I know I just said but it's like, at least I wrote down what I thought. But seriously though, none of these women cry or frown while recounting their stories. In fact, one of them actually smiles while recounting about how she saw a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy sacrificed at the age of 5. The boy was 5 years old. And she was just like, "Yeah, he was sacrificed." Why are you smiling about that? 11 minutes into the video, and it's not a very long video, it's like 40 minutes, but 11 minutes into this, I had the realization this is just Christian torture porn. Seriously, it is soft-core torture porn. Christian snuff. This is as close as Christians would ever get to making a snuff film. Seriously, think about it. They can't actually kill people or show people being disembodied, so they make up fake stories and fake videos about it. And instead of using the closest part to the snuff part is using photos of mutilated bodies and crime scene photos. That's the torture porn. That's the snuff part. So for me, it's really just a Christian horror film that's posing as a documentary. Once you start seeing things this way, it really changes the way that these type of videos are perceived, or types of videos. Instead of being something that is supposed to inform the audience, who I'm assuming we're supposed to assume is like the average white Christian audience for these films, the audience, I believe, is really like fundamentalists who seem to believe that anything that's wrong with this world is literally due to Satan. I mean, to me, it really seems like that the fundamentalists would be the one to seriously believe that Satan equals evil and evil equals Satan. It's as simple as that. Instead of being just like, oh yeah, I believe in God, I'm a Christian, and I go to church like once a week. I mean, this is like hardcore fundamentalist shit here. In comparison, though, to the older Satanic Panic films from the 80s, more of the 90s ones that I've seen seem to have this shift in thought, while almost trying to become philosophical about it. It's almost like, in some way, some people sent backlash to the ones originally creating these films. I'd like to imagine that the fundamentalists probably started to realize that legally you can't actually do something about somebody worshiping something different from you, Satan or not. Oh my God. Of course, there is still the claim that many of the brutal murder cases from that time period were due to Satan worship. One of the common examples is brought up again being Richard Ramirez. The strange thing about this, though, whenever any of these films bring up Richard Ramirez, is that while Ramirez did have an interest in Satan and what may have been, if you were to say this from a Church of Satan perspective, diabolist worship or diabolist interest, potentially Luciferian even, there doesn't seem to be very much information about what his experiences were. There is not very much information about his true interest in Satanism and Satan himself. Not even Wikipedia actually seems to talk much about the Satan part with Ramirez. I looked it up. My point here with this video is that Ramirez is brought up, but they ironically focus more on the fact that he killed people than the fact that he told his victims to swear on Satan. In fact, none of these Satanic Panic videos I have ever watched have ever mentioned the fact that Richard Ramirez told his victims to swear on Satan. Ironic, because if they mentioned that statement, it could have made it could have made the argument stronger. Oh my God, if you hear that, that's my dog. Fuck. Even still, anyone that commits crime in the name of Satan has a strong mental illness, and there is something that seems to even be called religious delusion. Another murderer is mentioned who was named, or was, I'm not sure if he's still alive, Clifford St. Joseph. I actually had never heard about this case before, but strangely enough, this was the first film of its type, the Satanic Panic type of film, to actually name where some of these common photos came from. So in other Satanic Panic films, they used a photo from St. Joseph's crime, but none of these other Satanic Panic films ever mentioned Clifford St. Joseph himself, which I found interesting because this was the first film to say his name. I didn't even realize where this photo was from because the other films never showed the photo itself very clearly. So it was kind of strange to me. I was like, oh, they actually mentioned the case. So I did end up having to, on my own time, look up the St. Joseph case and was surprised that it wasn't talked about more in this film for whatever reason. To quickly sum up, though, Clifford St. Joseph raped and killed a man, carved a pentagram into his skin under the idea of this being part of a satanic ritual. Now, none of these films ever mention that. They just show the picture of the pentagram itself, which is strange to me, of course. So this much was mentioned in this film, but not in other Satanic Panic films. But what wasn't mentioned in this film, and of course not in any other, was the fact that St. Joseph, Clifford St. Joseph, went on to tie up, drug, and rape another person with 3 of his friends. This was also mentioned as being part of an invitation, this is part of an initiation to a satanic group. This was not mentioned in the film or any other. I had to look this up, and I will just put on screen the case file that I saw this in. St. Joseph was convicted and sentenced to 34 years, but so little is known about that case, I don't know if that dude is still alive. Granted, anyway, let's back to the film. I found it strange that this wasn't mentioned, though, actually, because once again, strangely enough, if they mentioned that his crimes were done for like a satanic cult or satanic initiation, this would have actually supported the Christian argument of crime being done in the name of Satan. It's just odd to me that they didn't even put in that much more effort, which it really wasn't a lot more, not that I thought. But then again, I don't think the creators of this film really believed in what they were saying to begin with. It's well known that many of the pieces of Satanic Panic media were based on completely false reports. But I suppose it overlooked the actual criminals who would talk about occult topics. I think in many ways that was too scary for even Christians to think about. I think a lot of these films were made with the directors knowing that they were full of shit, obviously. But the idea of crime actually being committed because somebody really worshipped, a dark entity was probably too scary to actually think about. Once again, of course, the McMartin preschool case is mentioned, the most famous of all time with these Satanic Panic films. By the time the film came out, the case had already been dismissed, but what was interesting is how it mentioned that many of the jurors believed that the children were actually abused. Looking this up, this was true. And I think it's a very important thing to note. And I also want to point out that this wasn't mentioned, but strangely enough, a little connection here was that Ira Rayner was one of the prosecutors, I believe, on the case. And if you may follow me in my Manson stuff, Ira Rayner at one point was a lawyer for multiple Manson family members, I believe, who was kicked pretty quickly. So the McMartin case was very huge and very expensive, and it changed a lot in the way the law carried on after it. I think that it opened the eyes to more religious people being cognizant of actual sexual abuse, while showing others that we cannot prosecute or persecute. We can't persecute on religious fears alone. Without proper evidence, true justice cannot be done. And we can't, commit perjury just to get the result, the legal result that we hope for either. So the movie goes back to the women that were recounting their stories, where one, Esther, admits on camera to having killed someone. You know that this has to be fake by this point, because if you actually think that she killed someone, accident or not, and then admit it on camera, you would think that she would have been reported to the police, right? If this murder was true, why didn't Bob Larson or his crew report this woman? Why wasn't that woman in prison? And I'll just say that wherever I watched this, other people were commenting the same thing. Other people think the same thing too. Why wasn't this woman in prison if she actually killed someone? Because it's fake. So even when recalling the murder, this woman doesn't cry. She doesn't show any emotion other than someone trying to recall their lines. Then she claims that it just got even more crazy. She claimed then that she had to have oral sex with at least 12 dogs. And then the red rockets to these dogs had to be cut off too. I mean, what the fuck? She doesn't show any signs of disgust, fear, depression, or anything. No emotion. No emotion. The woman that claimed that she saw a 5-year-old sacrificed then went on to say that she saw her twin brother killed at the age of 4. And she was smiling, I believe, also when she said this. No distraught, no depression, no pain in her face or voice. None. None at all. There are various pieces of art shown that are supposed to convince the viewer that everything talked about in the film is totally real. But we don't know who created the art. We don't know if the people that drew the art were even children. We're just supposed to assume. The film moves over to adults that were getting therapy who were allegedly subjected to satanic ritual abuse. It's interesting how these individuals were actually listened to, and I wonder if there were people that went to such therapy to try and help their religious trauma in general. I wonder how many people didn't think that it was possible to even receive therapy for religious trauma until this point. Religious trauma is real. It's a very real thing. And people have experienced it with many religions in the world, Christianity included. The film goes on to their bread and butter, which of course is talking about how children are the biggest targets for Satanists. There is more fear-mongering here, with other alleged stories of children being tortured by Satanists, because these films are just talking about torture. It's all about torture. Another preschool was mentioned here, but none of the names were ever presented on the screen, so I couldn't find more info on it. I even tried to just be like basic Oregon preschool, Satan. I didn't see anything on it. So there was a screenshot or a clip of a newspaper shown on the screen, but I don't know when or where, whatever. So I'm not sure if that was actually even real. That's my point. But anyway, more crimes are mentioned, such as the one with Pete Rowland that was seen in other Satanic Panic media. In this video, it was stated that the teens felt compelled to kill after listening to Metallica, of all bands. Sean Sellers makes an appearance, of course, and tries to say that he committed his crimes because of Satanism. It's clear that Sellers used this as an excuse, instead of taking any accountability that he was an antisocial psychopath. Sellers is always brought up in these Satanic Panic films because he killed his mother and stepfather. And that's always brought up. But it's never mentioned how he killed his first victim. Sellers actually shot a gas station attendant or clerk before killing his his parents. And he killed this first person for not selling him beer. And apparently he just wanted to know what it was like to kill someone. The first murder is never brought up, nor does there ever seem to be any mention of Satan about this. Sellers converted to Christianity while on death row, another jailhouse convert, and it appears that none of his family members believed it was genuine except for one. What's interesting is that friends of Sellers tried to use his conversion as a way to get him out of prison. That's interesting, right? That makes me wonder if him appearing on the Satanic Panic films was part of the ruse. Thankfully, it didn't work, and Sean Sellers was executed in 1999. The film eventually and thankfully ends, and we see Bob Larson in the room with all of the satanic graffiti symbols again, and I laughed because I realized that one of them was literally just Amen backwards. Oh my god, so scary. It's so laughable how spooky it all looked. I can't imagine anyone watching a film like this and seriously believing any of it. In many ways, it's disrespectful to the victims of the actual crimes mentioned because the Christians here are claiming that they only died due to these religious reasons. Of course, I don't recommend this film. It's terrible, and none of the claims are substantiated. In modern day, I can look up more info, yes, but when this came out in 1990, viewers were expected to just believe everything in this at face value. I think that it's sinister to mix in real crimes with real crime scene photos to promote what's a philosophical idea. It's like going back to phrenology in many ways. The music was laughable, and most of the time it just seemed to be like the low E key on the keyboard. It sounded very brown note-ish, if that makes sense. Well, you know what, and it does make sense actually, because this film is doo-doo. Honestly. So my final grade for this is an F. I wouldn't even bother. And really, it's just a joke. This is all a fucking joke, isn't it?